All right, hey everyone. In today's video, we're going to be actually getting started modifying our front end and integrating our contracts into the React template. So at this point, you should have your front end directory and your TEALScript directory. And what we want to do is come down as front end source App.tsx. This is kind of where the main logic for our front end is contained. So if we go ahead, we'll do an npm run dev. Going to open this up. And we can see here, we have our template here. What I'm going to do, I'm just going to open up a split view and make this a little bit smaller. So now we can see here that we have our front end on the left here, and we can start modifying it. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say, welcome to the DAO. And I'm going to say, this is the front end for the Algorand Bootcamp DAO. Okay, so we can simply see that just making those simple changes itself updates automatically here. And now what I want to do is if I come and take a look, we can see here we have this getting started button, wallet connect button, and transaction demo. I'm going to delete this getting started link here. Okay, get rid of that. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete this transaction demo button. Okay, so now we just have a divider and then our wallet connection button, and then we can start adding our own buttons afterwards. And I'm also going to delete this transact modal because we're not using it. And then if we go up here, we can see that there's some stuff that we're no longer using. You don't have to delete the stuff we're not using. I'm using a demo modal. Okay, I think that takes care of everything. So at this point, all we have here is a button that allows us to connect our wallet. And so if we want to take a look at how this actually works, underneath the hood, we're using, let me get rid of this too. Underneath the hood, we're using this use wallet library provided by Transaction Labs. It's an open source library that allows you to easily connect to any wallet in the ecosystem. Because we're connected to our local net, the only option we have here is our local net wallet. But at the very end, I'll be showing you how we can switch to testnet and then connect to other networks and wallets. But for now, we're just going to stay on our local network. So when we do local net wallet, we're just going to connect right away to this local address here. And this is just an account on our local net that is pre-funded. Okay, so we've seen here, we've made some very basic changes. We've changed the text here and we've removed the buttons we don't need. But now we can actually get into adding the buttons we do want. So the first thing I want to do is I want to have a, actually let me get rid of this divider as well. Actually, I'm just going to move it. Where is it? Divider. I'm just going to move this down below here. So we're going to have a wallet connection up top and then a divider in our DAO specific buttons down here. So basically what I did is I just removed all the buttons we don't need and removed the related code so we can start integrating our own buttons. Now the question is, how do we integrate our own buttons? Now, of course, you could make your own components that interact with our app manually. However, if we I'm going to open up a new terminal. I'm going to cd into the TEALScript directory. And we can see here that there is this artifacts components directory. Oops, and I realized I forgot to remove that, so I'm just going to rm contracts, artifacts, components. You don't need to do this. I'm just doing this to demonstrate how it works. So we can see that there's this artifacts components directory. Wait, why did that not work? There we go. Just did an auto update for some reason. Okay. So we come back to TEALScript artifacts components. We can see here that this components directory is empty. However, if I run this command, npm run generate components. Oh, and I forgot to do an algod bootstrap, so let me do that. Algod bootstrap all. So that'll install my dependencies for me. And if I do npm run generate components, it's going to generate all of these components. Why is this not auto update? That's very strange. So it's going to generate all of these components here for me. So we can see here for each method in our contract, it auto-generated a unique component. So here what we're going to do is we're going to take this DaoCreateApplication, because the first button we want to implement is the button to actually, create our application. So we're going to right click on this, we're going to copy, and then we're going to come into our source components and paste. So what we've done is we ran npm run generate components. That generated this DaoCreateApplication component here in our TEALScript directory. And then we copied it to our source components directory here in our front end. Okay, so if we go ahead and let me minimize this while we're not using it. If we go ahead and take a look at our DaoCreateApplication component, we can see here that we have an example usage. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to put it right here below this divider. Okay. For some reason, my ESLint isn't working either. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pause this video and refresh my code space, because VS Code seems to be a bit slow, and then I'll come back in 1 second. Okay, sorry about that. I just needed to create my VS Code settings JSON to enable ESLint on save and format on save. So got that out of the way now. Anyways, and you don't need to do that. It's just my personal preference. I like having my code formatted on save. And you can alternatively just copy this VS Code directory out to the main branch as well, or into the main directory. Okay, getting back on track here. So what we can see here is if we came DaoCreateApplication, we just copied this example, pasted it here. Actually, let me split view this. We can see here that we're getting an error occurred. And what's saying is DaoCreateApplication is not defined. If we say here in our IDE, we can also see we have a bunch of stuff undefined. So let's go ahead and start defining this stuff that's not here. So the first thing I need to do is import DaoCreateApplication from the component. So this is the component we copied over. We're going to go ahead and import that. Okay, and now the next thing that's not defined is our typed client. So what we're expecting here in our typed client is an instantiation of our client that we already have generated here in our clients. So I'm just going to go ahead, right click, copy. If I go to TEALScript, contracts, clients, DAO client, and then copy, then come back to our front end. I'm going to paste that. Why is paste? There we go. Paste that into my contracts directory here. And now what I need to do is instantiate it. So I'm going to come up here and I'm going to say, actually first I need to import it. So I'm going to do import, I think that's called DAO client from contracts DAO client. Okay, And I'm going to come down here and I'm just going to say const type client equals new DAO client. And I'm going to pass in an object here. And I'm going to say resolve by ID. And my ID is going to be 0. Okay, so this is very similar to what we did. If we come back, take a look at our TEALScript tests, we can see here we're doing pretty much the same thing. So we're importing our DAO client, resolving by ID, setting it to 0. But this time around, we're not explicitly sending a sender. And that's because we need to get the sender dynamically each time we use our DAO client. So we're not going to be setting the sender right away. And now the other thing we need to pass in, so if we take a look at the error here, it's expecting an algod argument. So I'm going to create another variable called algod client. I'm going to say this is algokit dot get. Oh, I don't have it's imported either. So let me do import star as algokit from algokit utils, and then come back down here, get algo client, and I'm going to pass in my server is going to be from my algod config server, my port, test it, algod config.port, and then my token is algod config.token. And this algod config, it's getting the configuration for our algod client, so how we connect to the network from our environment variables. And now what we can do is we can just simply pass algod client here. Okay. So again, to recap, we've imported our DAO create application. We've imported our generated TypeScript client. We've imported AlgoKit to create an algod client and a typed client. And now we can pass that to our DAO create application. The last thing is here, we don't have our proposal variable defined. So I'm just going to hard code this for now to this is a proposal. If I come over here and I refresh, what we can now see is if I go to wallet connection and I connect to a wallet, actually, and one other thing, I'm going to change this to create DAO. And I click create DAO. What we should see happen is if we open up our console, we'll see here that we've sent a transaction that created an application. So what we've done up to this point is we've slightly modified our React template to have our own button. And that button was rendered by this component that we just copy and pasted from this generated file. And we can see here that we have successfully added our first interaction between our front end and our DAO contract. So at this point, of course, we have our, if we come back to our App.tsx, we have our proposal hard-coded. And what we want to do is we want to avoid having that hard-coded value. So in the next session, we'll be talking about how we can provide a way for the end user to provide their own proposal. And I encourage you to think about how you might want to do that before you go to the next video. So if you're familiar with React, you want to think about, how you can create a form to pass in that value. And if you're not familiar with React, just think about the concepts, like what that would look like from a UI perspective. And then in the next video, we'll talk about how we actually do that implementation. So I'll see you then.